I got to be honest with you folks. It's been very difficult being the host of a comic book focused YouTube channel as of late. There just isn't a whole lot to get excited about. And even when there are a few things to get excited about, like maybe Dawn of DC and DC actually publishing some good comic books that are worth reading, of course, DC Comics are going to do something to step on their own dick and ruin it. It's just the way that this industry works right now, and it's hard to get really excited about almost anything these days. In fact, I've had like 2 or 3 stories that I needed to cover that are all varying degrees of depressing. That's probably the best way to describe it. Today, I'm going to cover the most recent one that was actually brought to my attention this week. And then over the next 2 days, I'm going to cover the other 2, really delving into the state of comic book sales in the biggest growth market within comic books, actually bookstores. And then I'm going to show you one of the biggest shit shows I've ever seen amongst comic book retailers in my life. But first, I want to talk about this article by Sketched. It's one of those new wave internet sites where they take out the vowels to make the name of the website, or whatever, man. But they go out there and they talk to comic book retailers every once in a while. In fact, I guess in January, the writer of this article had talked to retailers, and they said they saw bad times coming in the not too distant future. And he does a follow-up in this one. Yeah, and they were right. It's not very good, shockingly. And I want to go into some of the stuff that they talk about here. And I want to open up with what's said kind of near the end of this. But I thought it was really an interesting statement. Earlier this year, I was talking with a retailer who had a big thought about the state of things. He wondered whether comics retail had died already, effectively, and what we are existing in now was a zombie direct market. It continues to operate simply because it doesn't know how to do anything else, with the massive boost the pandemic proved to be for comic sales fueling its second life. I hear from so many people that, yes, they still go to their comic book shop and on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, and they still get a few select titles because they've always bought them, but they're not really enthusiastic to read them. And a lot of times, if you're a Spider-Man fan, you just don't read the comic book, or if you're a Batman fan, you don't read the comic book, and you certainly don't go out of your way to test out new comic books because you kind of know what you're going to get. Nothing you really want to buy into, but you've had this comic book habit, this comic book hobby for so long, you have a complete run of this or that, and you just kind of keep doing it because you've always done it. And that is basically where we are right now. The retailers do go into some really interesting aspects of the comic book market. The writer states, traditionally, the what's working quotes for these pieces dominate the what isn't ones in terms of length. While we all love riffing on things we don't enjoy, retailers are in this for the love of the game. I'm used to shops raving about standouts. This year, what isn't working towers over what is. Take this line from comic shop owner Patrick Brower, who said, "While there are certainly winners in today's market, I don't know that there will be big winners anymore. Even the bestsellers for us sell a fraction of what bestsellers sold in past years." And that is one of the real uncertainties in today's market. We used to get actual comic book sales, at least to the comic book shops, from Diamond. We would get a monthly Diamond report. Comic-Con would come out with it. ICB2 would do some analysis, and you would basically know what was selling to shops at least. And you imagine that comic book shops are ordering based on the interest of their customers. So you would have a good idea of what's popular right now. You would have a good idea what was healthy and what wasn't healthy. We haven't known the actual sales of anything since the pandemic happened and Diamond was basically broken apart as a monopoly of comic book distribution. And in the early stages of that, you would have DC come out and say, we sold 180,000 copies of James Tynion's latest Batman issue or whatever. And you could see that Batman was number one, and you could see maybe the high water mark was about 100,000, or maybe Image would come out and say, we sold, 90,000 of this, or Boom would say, we sold 130,000 copies of Something is Killing the Children, or whatever that follow-up sequel series was. And you would have a general idea, at least, if you trusted them, of what the sales were, at least on the top. We haven't gotten any of that for months. I'm thinking, I truly believe this because of the state of Amazing Spider-Man and it being so bad and still being the number one best-selling ongoing series, and then Batman not being very good and it still being in the top 5. Normally it's number 2. I think in June it was number 3. That the best-selling ongoing title right now might be at 80,000 or less, which would absolutely be shocking, and a good reason why Marvel and DC aren't touting any numbers. Not only are we not getting the reports, we're not even getting a whiff of what comic book sales are right now. I think they are in the toilet beyond what we can actually imagine as far as the direct market. I think it is absolutely awful right now. The article does mention a few things that were standing out. The one that was mentioned the most was Dawn of DC. And even it comes with the downside. As enthusiastic as retailers were about the initiative, the fact that all of its titles are almost immediately going away for 2 months so a line-wide horror event and Night Terrors can replace them is enough to drive retailers mad. Another retailer named Bautista described it as not just shooting your own foot, they did it with a bazooka. Absolutely. I had Eric Breen on the channel not too long ago, and he was like, hey, I'm kind of liking DC Comics right now. I'm liking Green Arrow. I'm liking Superman. We got this new Green Lantern series. Flash was doing really well there for a minute. We'll see where that goes. And I'm going in to buy my DC Comics right now. Maybe not Marvel so much, but at least there's some quality at DC. What does DC Comics do? We need another horror-based Joshua Williamson line-wide event to shut everything down for 2 months and not tell a story of any significance, kill all of our momentum, and give everyone a reason not to come back to their comic book shop and forget about DC Comics for a while. It's the dumbest thing in the world. And shockingly, I bet you'll be really surprised to hear this one. Eric Breen reached out to me this week, and he wants to do a redo on that DC video because he has new thoughts now after everything that's happening with Night Terrors in a little comic book this week called Hawkgirl. If you haven't heard that one, I'm going to make Doc read it and review it with me on Monday. And then Eric and I are going to talk about some of the implications for the wider DC Comics universe and why this was a terrible idea. And that was the good news. And even that came with a really bad caveat on it. They get into some of the things that absolutely aren't working. Multiple shops emphasize that comics are just getting too expensive. Customers are noticing and reacting, with some even returning books to the shelves or reducing their pull list as a result. Rising prices cut in 2 other ways as well. Joe Field has seen customers use $9.99 anniversary issues as not a moment of celebration, but a jumping off point. He also finds himself ordering fewer copies of the more expensive titles, knowing that customers will bristle at the price. That happened at Big Bang with the Ultimate Invasion #1, as they were super conservative when ordering because of its price point, despite its towering pedigree. Several shops believed Marvel cost itself significant orders and revenue because of that $8.99 cover price. And why does it cost $8.99? Besides the fact that it's Jonathan Hickman and Brian Hitch, 2 of the better creators in comic books, and it's probably going to be a good story, but we got some data pages in there. We got some layouts of the way things work, and we got some art sketches. Well, this wasn't a special director's cut, where you pay more because you want that kind of material in there. They just made you pay for it anyway. That is absolutely ridiculous because they knew there would be at least interest in this. But comic book shops are absolutely wising up. They're like, yeah, I just can't order as much. I know there will be interest, but I can only order for the exact amount of interest I believe there will be, and I'm not going to overorder. If more people come in than I have actual issues for, I'll go reorder. But I'm not going to go out there on a financial limb on a comic book that costs $9. You can get a manga for $9. Those special $10 anniversary issues, you can get a volume of manga. You can get an entire volume 1 of Image Comics for that. That's a lot of money. And most of the times, you get a featured writer and artist. That's the big story. You get a backup that's not too bad, and then it's a bunch of nobodies. It's Vita Ayala and Steve Fox and Stephanie Phillips or another generic Stephanie. And it's never, ever worth the money. And people are catching on to this. Comics are way too expensive. I guarantee you the average comic price for DC Comics is well over $6 now. And believe me, Marvel Comics will jump up to that $4.99 price point for all their comic books just as the baseline in the not too distant future. They're only going to get more expensive, and Marvel and DC are only going to continue to drive customers away over to manga and other competitors. That's just the way it is. And the retailers are absolutely getting kicked in the nuts over this. And I definitely encourage all of you to go read this article on sketch.com for yourselves. It's pretty interesting. I can't cover all of it here, but here's one of the final things they said. Running a comic shop is hard, one with tightening margins, limited support, and often adversarial relationships with partners, if said partners even engage with you. Sometimes I wonder why shops keep doing it at all. Some are asking themselves that question too. Joe Field told me that Flying Colors is celebrating its 35th anniversary in October, and he honestly doesn't know how long the shop will be around past that. As a reflection of where he's at, when I asked Field what keeps him passionate about the job, he simply said survival. It keeps me passionate. If the only thing that you can get passionate about and enthusiastic about in the comic book industry is just surviving and keeping your shop open, for another year, we are in bad times, even if there are people out there that would like to tell you and I that things have never been better for Western comic books. DC and Marvel have never been stronger. It's not the case. Retailers are struggling. DC and Marvel aren't producing comic books people want to read. That's why they're having to do so many variant cover schemes. That's why so many retailers are having to go out there and create their own covers. because people don't want to buy the comic book for what's inside anymore, because the stories suck. The characters aren't relatable. The hero's journey is all but gone. It's all filler and crap. Everything is written for the trades. Most writers in the comic book industry today cannot tell a single story within 22 pages of a comic book. Every single writer in the industry used to do that in every comic book. Even if a story lasted 4 or 5 issues, every single issue had a beginning, middle, and end with the resolution. You do not get that anymore. You get a lot of people sitting at tables, eating sushi, having conversation, and a whole lot of non-action going on within comic books. DC and Marvel have dropped the ball, and they put these retailers in a terrible spot. This is the depressing state of American comic books. This is what's happened to the direct market. This is why you just don't see a lot of enthusiasm out there, because there's nothing to be excited about right now. These aren't the only retailers that talked about it. A few weeks ago, I talked about Rod Lamberti, who owns a shop in Iowa called Rodman Comics, and he was taking Marvel to task, calling them out on their bullshit. It was a great article, and I really enjoyed covering this. We'll definitely check this out as well. There's also a link in the video description.